might have been Logan, but they didn't have watches. They had something else. They lived up to a certain age and they tried to get out. Otherwise, they would be killed.
Yes.
And the guy goes, the two get out and they meet this guy who's an older guy. And the guy teaches them what's going on.
Might be. It sounds
Yeah,
familiar.
that's Logan's Run. Great movie.
Okay. You never would have gotten
Great,
that.
great movie.
You got 30 seconds.
But
Just made it.
somebody told me to go watch another movie today, which was kind of ironic. It's called Idiocracy.
Oh my gosh, it's so funny. I love that.
Oh, it is?
movie.
You finally saw that?
Yes.
I gotta go.
It's
I read
a
it.
scream.
I have to see this movie.
It's frighteningly true.
Oh,
Even better.
Even better, yeah.
Even better, yeah. Okay, so now I have to go see this movie.
You totally could.
Hey, Lois.
Hi, Rabbi. Hi, all.
Hi, Lois.
Hi, Liz.
Haven't seen you in ages. How are you?
Just the way you left me, I guess.
I got
No,
it.
actually, I'm better. Okay.
That's good. Rabbi Karch is here with us.
In spirit.
Didn't
No,
know.
I wouldn't say it's spirit.
You wouldn't say that?
Flesh. They're flesh and spirit.
Don't want that.
That's empty. So it's up in the,
Don't want those. Okay, I'm good.
I allow myself to eat that kind of stuff. I would want them and I would eat them. The only reason I don't is because I don't. allow
That's
myself.
good self-control. Of course, I had 2 great big handfuls of pretzels before I left the house, so. I can say no at
I
this
wonder
point.
if this movie on cable, I can
What?
call it up. Idiocracy. I have to go see.
I don't
It's
think
gotta
it's
be
on
on one of the streaming
YouTube.
services.
Probably.
You can pay for it on YouTube and then you can screen
Yes,
share it right
that's
under your.
I might do that at my office one day. Just have some fun with it.
I want to see that movie again. Oh my gosh, it's so funny.
You're the third person that says you have to go watch this movie.
Oh my gosh.
Okay, I'm gonna have to go watch it.
It's just like delightfully dumb fun.
So if I watch it in the next couple of days, I'm gonna come back and go, hello. It is, it's crazy. It's a wild
Yeah.
movie.
Hi. Hey, Doris.
Hi, Rabbi Karsh, how are you?
Excellent. Hey, Jason.
Hi, Rabbi, how are you?
Very good, thank you. Very good to see you guys.
I was almost live and in person, and then something happened.
Almost doesn't count.
This is second best,
I
Jason.
know. Well, thank you.
Jason, do you see doesn't Doris's actual living place look like a picture?
It looks very nice.
Yes, it
Thank
does.
you, thank you.
Yes. I'm sure it's a great place to work.
It's very
Creative.
Yes,
All those brushes and something very creative is going on behind you.
Lights.
often, that's true.
Yes. Okay.
The whole picture, it wasn't just the lights, it's the cabinets, everything goes with it.
Okay, so this week is a double Torah portion, a double parsha.
Can you hear him?
This week is a double parsha, Beher and Bechukotai, Beher and Bechukotai, and Beher, which is these are the last 2 parshas of Vayikra, of the Torah portion of Vayikra. And Beher begins with the discussion of Shemitah and Yovel. So, and if you pay attention to the text, it actually sounds like this time of year, because it says When you get to the land, which I'm giving you, the land is going to have a sabbatical. 6 days you shall plant. Not 6 days, 6 years you shall plant your fields, 6 years you shall prune your vineyards, and you will gather your grain. And then in the 7th year, it's going to be a sabbatical year for the land. It'll be a sabbatical for God. You will not plant your fields. You will not prune your vineyards. You're not going to even collect that which grows naturally during that time. It's going to be, again, a sabbatical for the land. You are, and it's going to be for you, it's going to be for your servants, your maidservants, and those other people that dwell in the land, the people that you hire out who live with you, and your animals, both domesticated and wild, which are in your land. They're going to eat the food, but you're not going to work the land. So that actually sounds very much like Shabbos, but Shabbos for the land. So you're going to work it 6 years, and then you're going to be off the 7th year. And even when it describes your servants and your animals, that's in the 10 Commandments, in the first set of 10 Commandments. It says that the Shabbos is for you, but it's also for those who in your household, even your servants and manservants, even your animals. Sounds very much like Shabbos, but it's a sabbatical for the land. And then it says that there's going to be 7 of these cycles, and so which is going to make 49 years. And then there's going to be a shofar blast on that Yom Kippur afterwards. And you're going to sanctify the 50th year. This is the part that sounds like the time we're in. So you have, first it sounds like Shabbos, then it sounds like Shavuos, because you have 7 times 7. Shavuos is 7 times 7. You have 7 times 7 weeks. I heard Rabbi Ephraim Twersky Shlita even point this out, that if you look back at the description, which was from last week's Torah portion of what we call Shavuos, Shavuos means weeks. So it starts off on the day after the Sabbath, you start to count 7 weeks. So you have the word Sabbath, then 7 Sabbaths, because the weeks are described like Sabbaths. And then you're going to, on the day after that is going to be this holiday. So there's all this Sabbath kind of description. And then eventually you have a 50th day. And this is almost exactly the same. A lot of the language is very, if you put the language up next to the language of Shavuos, but the language of what we call the Jubilee year, it's very similar. And again, if you put up the Sabbath, the language of Shabbos itself, 6 days you shall work, and on the 7th day you shall rest. Here it's saying 6 days you shall work the land, and on the 7th day the land is going to rest. Also, Shabbos is called Shabbos LaHashem Elokecha. You have a Sabbath for the Lord your God. Here too, it says for the land, but it also says for God. So there's lots of parallel between these descriptions. And then there's that 50th year. The 50th year, we're told, is a kind of freedom. Cross some drawer, you should call out freedom amongst the land. That verse is actually on the Liberty Bell, that you should ring out freedom or call out freedom in the land. So the 50th year is associated with some notion of freedom. And there are those who suggest that the 50th day, which is Shavuos, if we associate the 50th day with the holiday of Shavuos, that the 50th day is also about freedom, because the Torah itself, or in this case, the tablets are considered a kind of pathway to freedom. The rabbis say, it says chorus alaluchos, carved onto the tablets. Al tikra chorus elacherus. Don't read it as carved, but read it as freedom. That there's freedom in the tablets. That somehow the accepting of the Torah is a path towards freedom. Somehow here, this is also this setup, this kind of setup that you have for the land is a kind of setup for freedom, some kind of notion of freedom. So you have this, what appears to be a textual kind of parallel between Sfirat HaOmer and then Shavuos and the Shemitah cycles and the Jubilee year. Similar language, similar structure, 7 sevens, but it's years instead of days, but very, very similar. And I'm suggesting also even the last part, which is the 50th year or 50th day, has an element of freedom associated with it. When you imagine a utopian world, what do you imagine? In the Torah, we only get little glimpses of what the Torah envisions as a utopian world. This is one of them, where you get a sense of what the Torah imagines is a utopian world. In the utopian world, you're going to plant, you're going to harvest, and then we're going to be in the land of Israel. The Jewish people are going to be in the land of Israel. We're going to plant, we're going to harvest, and there's going to be a sabbatical, and then we're going to plant and we're going to harvest, and there's going to be a sabbatical, and then we're going to plant and we're going to harvest, and there's going to be a sabbatical, and then eventually there's going to be a sabbatical and then a jubilee year, and then we're going to go back to planting and harvesting. That appeared, this is before any discussion of sin. This is before discussion of any corruption, any messing up, before any of that. The description here is planting and harvesting and a kind of rest, planting and harvesting and a kind of rest, planting and harvesting, kind of rest. That there's no discussion of corruption, sin, or anything that's going to mess it up. That is this I would call utopian. Also at the beginning of
Pre-creation.
well, it is after what we would call eating from the tree of garden of good and evil, of that description. It's after that, but again, it sounds pretty utopian. At the beginning of next, in other words, later on, there's going to be discussion. If you sin, then the rains are not going to come. Then this is going to happen, and your enemies are going to happen. Also, at the beginning of next week's, of the second parsha, Beher-Bechukotai, the beginning of that one. So it starts off by saying, if you follow all my laws and you keep my mitzvahs and you do them, then the rains are going to come in their proper time. The land is going to give its produce. All the fruit of the trees will give their fruit. And the harvest seasons will meet each other as you go through. You'll eat your bread to your full, and you will live in the land in peace. There will be peace in your land. There will not be fear. You won't have fear. Even wild animals are not going to end up killing you. No sword will go through your land. If you have enemies, you'll chase after them and they'll die. They'll fall before you by the sword. 50 will run from you, 100, I'm sorry, 100 people will be chased by 5 of you, 10,000 of them will be chased by 100 of you. Your enemies will fall before you. You'll be fruitful and multiply in the land, and my covenant will be kept with you. You'll end up being able to eat old stuff because, again, you're going to have big harvests that are going to last a long time. My dwelling place will be amongst you. I will not be upset with you. I will walk amongst you. I will be for you a God, and you will be for me a nation. I'm the Lord your God who took you out of Egypt, where you were slaves. I broke the yoke of your slavery, and I caused you to walk straight with dignity. So that's the description, like of what would appear to be a best case scenario. The only thing I would say that the only element that exists here that does not exist, that is not from the messianic vision, is the enemies, because it says you're going to defeat your enemies, but the fact that there's still war and enemies, that seems to be a deviation from the kind of messianic dream. But you do see, even in this, what I'm suggesting is like the best case scenario, utopian existence, there still is work. There still is work. And I've suggested in the past that this parallels the creation, the second creation story. In the second creation story, in chapter 2, we are told that God puts man in the garden. This is one of the first verses of that second thing, that God puts man in the garden, la'ovda u'lashamra, to work it and to guard it. But part of it seems from here, from there and from here, that the fact that we are going to work, that we're going to do something called avodah, the fact that we are going to work is going to happen in this world in all circumstances, even in the best case scenario, It may be because there was a curse after eating the tree of knowledge of good and evil, there was a curse. You will eat your bread with the sweat of your brow. So it could be that you're not going to have sweat of your brow. In other words, maybe that wasn't part of the original intent. That happens because we ate from the tree. But the fact that we are going to do work, that we're here to work, that seems to be a part of the assumption. The condition of our life here on this plane of existence is going to involve something called avodah, something that's called service. We're here to serve. We're here to serve. Now that word, avodah, which means to work in these contexts and in the Shabbos context, that word many suggest that it's related to the word eved, that it means hard work, as opposed, like the work of an eved is a slave or servant. Eved is a servant. So typically that's a kind of grunt work. It's an assumption of some kind of grunt work. So that's what your servants are doing. Your servants are doing the work that you'd rather not do. So it might mean in a lot of cases the heavier work, but it also might mean the unpleasant work. That's typically the stuff that you would imagine that an Eved does. There are certain, like, for instance, let's say somebody has a nanny in the house to take care of their children. So the nanny is going to put them to bed. She's going to do the part that the parents, the drama, that's. The nanny is the one who's going to put them to bed. But right before she puts them to bed, after she's made sure they're bathed and had their diapers changed and everything, then she brings them in to say goodnight to the parents. And then she's back to making sure that they go to bed. So all the stuff that is the hard part, the stuff that we don't want to do, that's the stuff that the Eved would do. That's the stuff that your servant would do. If you're having a dinner party, let's say you're having a dinner party and you have lots of guests. So the people who set up and make sure that all the details are taken care of when it comes to the caterer and deciding who, as much as possible, deciding where people are staying. Obviously, there are parts of this that only the master of the house can do, but otherwise they're going to do all that other kind of stuff. They're going to make sure it's dusted and cleaned and all the dishes are put out, and they're also going to do the cooking and the preparing of the food. And then when it comes to the actual interaction with the other people, the interaction with the other people is going to be taken care of by the by the master of the house. But the servants are going to take care of the grunt work, of the difficult work. That seems to be, when we say avodah, when it talks about avodah, it seems like that's what we mean. There's one day a week or 1 year in a cycle where we're told you don't have to do the grunt work. You're not going to have to plow the fields and plant the fields and things like that. There's going to be 1 day a week or 1 year in a cycle, per 7-year cycle, where you're going to be relieved, where we're going to be relieved of that. But then we go back to that because we are the Eved. In the relationship, in our time on this plane, we come into it as an Eved. We come into it as a servant. That seems to be our status. God made a garden, and he brought us into the garden. Again, this is before anything went wrong. Nobody ate from any tree. Nobody did anything wrong. But even before anybody did anything wrong, God brought us into the garden. La'avdo l'shamra. He brought us in to work it and to guard it. And when we use that word work, that's what we mean. We're doing grunt work. We're doing some kind of the work that a master of the place wants to delegate. We do the stuff that's delegated. Even in the first telling of creation, it says that when God says, I'm going to make man in my image. And then what's going to be the responsibility of this person, of this man, of the human? What's going to be the responsibility of the human? They're going to manage the birds, manage the fish of the sea, the birds of the heaven, and they're going to and the animals. They're going to manage the life of creation. We're brought in, as Rabbi Foreman calls, to be middle management, because he created it and then he wants it to be successful, but he brought us in to take care of that. We're being brought in to take care of that. We're servants. The servant is an extension of the master, but oftentimes is relegated to doing the grunt work, the day-to-day kind of stuff that the master doesn't want to be bothered with. Best scenario, again, there are those, you'll see Gemaras where they'll suggest that really, like Rav Shimon Bar Yochai, whose day we're celebrating today with Lag BaOmer, Rav Shimon Bar Yochai says that really we were designed to study Torah all day. That's what we were designed for. We're designed to study Torah all day. When he was asked, well, what about all these parts in the Torah that talk about working the land? He says, well, if we study Torah all day, God will make sure other people work the land for us. they'll work the land for us and we'll study all day. So he suggests that, but the Rabbi Yishmael argues with him, and he says it doesn't work. It's not going to work. And Abaye later on, I believe it was Abaye, who said many people tried like Rav Shem Bar Yochai and it didn't work. It may be there are individuals that could do it, that could study all day, and other people will do their work, but it's not a common thing. It doesn't work for most people. Many tried it and did not work. That thing, whereas they tried Rav Shem by Rabbi Yishmael. Rabbi Yishmael's thing was that we'll work part-time and we'll study part-time. In other words, you do your spiritual stuff and the physical work part-time, but it's part of the destiny. Even again, it looks that way, even from the text, that best case scenario, that's why we're here. La'avda u'lashamra. Even if you think about the temple, the Beit HaMikdash, and you ask yourself, what did the Kohanim do? The Kohanim did the service in the Beit HaMikdash. If you think about the Beit HaMikdash, it's modeled after the house of a Lord. In this case, it's the Lord, but it's modeled after the house of the Lord. You have a master who has a house, and then you have the service. You have the service community. They're the people that are taking care of everything. They make sure the lamps are lit and the bread's baked and the tables are set and the food's being served and guests are being taken care of. That's what they do. In fact, we characterize it as avodah. The service that the Kohanim are doing in the Beis HaMikdash is characterized as avodah. It is service. What they're doing is service. This is the kind of service that would be done in the home of a lord, or the home of an aristocrat, or home of a master. It's the grunt work. These are the people that we consider our most elevated, the ones we look up to, the ones we admire, the ones we want our daughters to marry, these Kohanim. These people that we look up to and we admire, in other words, again, the best of us, what we would call the best of us, are servants. They do service. That's what they do. They are modeling in a kind of spiritual context. They are modeling what we do in a broad sense, cosmically. We are servants. When we ended up in Egypt, the problem with Egypt is not that we were servants. That wasn't the problem in Egypt. The problem in Egypt was we were servants to Paro. That was what went wrong in Egypt, but not that we're doing service. The fact that we're doing service, this is what we're here for. This is not just the Jewish people, this is all of mankind. And to some degree, this is why we're here. We're here to serve. If somebody asked you, why are you here? You would say, I'm here to serve. Rebbe Cardoza, may he live long and in good health, Rabbi Nathan Lopez Cardoza made this point on many occasions, that the Torah is not a book of rights. It doesn't discuss rights. It's a book of responsibilities. When you encounter somebody else or something else, the thought that you should be trained to ask yourself is, how can I serve? In this circumstance, what can I do? What do you need? I could say to another person. I also could say it to an animal, a fish, or a bird. How can I be of service? I could say it to a tree. How can I be of service? I could say it to the grass. How can I be of service? In my relationship with anything that is part of creation, I am here to serve ultimately because because this is what God put me here for. He put me into the garden, la'avda u'lashamra, to work it and to guard it, to protect it. So it suggests an attitude for this phase of our existence. We have a tradition that we have other phases of existence, that we existed before we came into this world, that we're going to exist after we leave this world. But in this phase of our existence, we're here to serve. And it's never going to not be like that. Even in a messianic time, if somebody imagines a time where they're going to be sitting and being fed grapes, and that somehow is the goal, that if you do everything right, and you work for a period of time, then you get eventually a time of just complete reward. And by reward, we imagine that it means that at that point, no more work. I'm just going to be taken care of. I'm just going to be fed. Years ago, when I was in Shir with Ramosha Shapiro, bless his memory, he made the point that in a spiritual world, in a world of ruchnius, in a spiritual world, it's all about acting upon and not being acted on. That ruchnius is like that. Ruach, the ruchnius, which is ruchniut, which is the Hebrew word for spirituality, is built on the word ruach. Ruach is wind. Wind is always in motion. Wind is always blowing. It's always moving. And something that is, it's always not just, but it's not just something that's moving. In our sense, it's not just that we're moving, but that we're always considered to, we're always trying to make whatever, to fix or to make the thing that we encounter better. So I asked him, well, what about those Gemaras that say in the future that tzaddikim will sit with crowns on their head and study Torah, in the splendor of God, etc. And he just looked at me and he goes, I'm going to have to take your brain. Because he actually literally said that. I'm going to take your brain. We're going to send it to a cleaner because it's going to have to clean your brain. He said, you think that you're going to one day be in some place sitting on a couch and somebody's going to be feeding you grapes. That's been the goal of everything. That's why God made the universe and everything that's in it, so that one day you could be sitting on a couch and somebody is feeding you grapes.
We can stamp the grapes and we can drink them.
Right. That is not it. There is no time when we don't imagine that we are going to be giving, that we are going to be doing, that we are going to be serving. This is not part of our dream. It's only a question about conditions. Will we be able to serve God in conditions of safety and security? Will we be able to do it in a place where there's, ample food and there's ample other things? But those are the conditions for our service. But it never ends up that we're not going to serve. There might be a day off. But even the day off, when you look at the nature of the day off isn't about, again, just indulgence for the sake of indulgence. Even that day off is from that kind of creative work, is to offer an opportunity for a service on another level. It's interesting. My son Moishi asked this question the other day. How come in the Beis HaMikdash you're allowed to do work when on Shabbos you're not supposed to do work? In fact, in the second telling of the Ten Commandments, it says, Sheishes Yomim, it says, Shamar es Yom HaShabbos HaKadsho, guard the Sabbath and keep it holy. Kasher tzivcha Hashem Elokecha, like the Lord your God commanded. Sheishes Yomim Tavod v'asisa kol malachtecha. 6 days you shall work and do all of your creative work. The Yom HaShvi Shabbos L'Hashem Elokecha, and the 7th day you're going to stop for the Lord your God. Lo sasa kol malacha, you will not do creative work. Ata uvincha v'itecha, you, your sons and daughters. Va'avdecha v'amosecha, this is that kind of language I was saying was parallel to the Shemitah language. V'shorcha v'chamorcha, your oxes and your donkeys, all your animals, and the converts or the strangers in your gate, so that even your servants and maidservants will rest like you. And you will remember that you were a Eved in Egypt. And God took you out of there with a strong arm, an outstretched arm. Therefore, Hashem wants you to keep the Shabbos. But it says, Sheshis Yamim Tavod, 6 days you shall do your avodah and all your malachtecha, but on the 7th day you won't. And it calls that Shamor at Yom HaShabbos HaKadsho. So it says Shamor at Yom HaShabbos HaKadsho. You shall guard the Sabbath. How do you guard the Sabbath? By not working on that day, not doing your avodah. It says, don't do your avodah. How do you not do your avodah? How do you do your guarding? You don't do your avodah. Now, we call the work that the Kohanim do avodah. We call it avodah. It's not actually working the land, but we call it avodah. How come they're allowed to do it on Shabbos? Here it says you don't do avodah on Shabbos, and their sacrificial work is called avodah, and they're doing it on Shabbos. How are they allowed to do it on Shabbos? So, if you go back again to the language of the garden, in the language of the garden, it says la'avda u'l'shamra. You will work it and you will guard it. And when you're in the Garden of Eden, you're going to work it and you're going to guard it. Somehow, working and guarding goes together. But here, outside of the garden, in our work, they don't go together. There's 6 days you do avodah, and then the 7th day is the shmirah, is the guarding. Can you guard by not doing the creative work? So somehow, in our world, there's like 6 days where you work, and on the 7th day you rest. But for some reason in the Garden of Eden, it was all together. It was somehow all mixed together. The la'avda u'l'shamra, the guarding and the working. So, and you see in the Beis Hamikdash, somehow it seems like you have Shabbos, but they're still doing avodah. They're still working on Shabbos. This is why I'm suggesting to you that there is some kind of work. There is some kind of work on some level, something that is called service. We're never going to stop serving. Even in a time when it looks like Shabbos is not about work, there's some kind of service that is being done, that is somehow being modeled there. And there's something in the Garden of Eden too. Rabbi Foreman has an idea that he develops. It really takes a while you have to sort of meditate on this idea, but he suggests that in the Garden of Eden, there was compressed time. Everything happens just on one day. It's all one day. You don't see days. You never hear Shabbos. There's no discussion of Shabbos in the Garden of Eden. That whole story about Adam and Eve, there's no Shabbos there. It's not discussed. And if you look carefully at the story, there's not days. There's day. There's just day. There's one. So he wanted to suggest that in the Garden of Eden, time is somehow compressed all into one time, one day.
One unit.
And that outside of the garden, the experience is somehow decompressed. In a decompressed world, there's time and there's 6 days and then there's Shabbos, and in a compressed world, it all happens together. It's worth following his treatment of it, but it takes some time to absorb it. And so there's something deeper and worth spending time on about this. But all I'm interested in is just showing that even that even in our time, it sounds like that Shabbos is a time not to work. The Yovel is a time not to work. There's going to be a time in our life where we're not working. And I'm suggesting that that is a mistake. It's not working like we're used to working, but there's never a time when we don't work. Even in the garden, they were there la'ovda. And beforehand, we were designed, before we ever ate from the tree, to be God's middle management in this plane of existence. We are here to serve God, and serving God means some kind of grunt work. It's either spiritual grunt work or physical grunt work, but it involves something that we're going to call avodah, labor. There is something that's laborious. It could have to do, it could be something that doesn't require physical exertion. It's possible it doesn't require a lot of physical exertion. It doesn't have to be a lot. And it could be something that could be done with even relative ease, but there is always going to be avodah. There's always avodah. The Beis Hamikdash. Yeah. Go ahead.
It's always said that the luckiest people are the ones that love their work. They get up to go to work. And I'm wondering if that would be something to aspire to. We are going to love to plant and harvest. And
Ivdu es Hashem b'simcha. It says, Ivdu as it serve God with joy. And tachas asher lo avarata es Hashem alakecha b'simcha. In one of these tohachos, it might even be in this one. It says, because you did not serve God with simcha, with joy, all this stuff happens. I don't know if it's here or if it's this one or in Kisevo. Let's see here. Yeah, right now I don't remember. It's in one of them, or it's in one of the two rebukes. It says, because you did not serve Hashem with simcha. So yeah, so that I like that. That it's the and that not only is it kind of necessary for the success of the work, but you could say that as a condition, it makes that it's expected that the work could be joyous. That the work should be joyous, that it's not supposed to be painful work, but again, it's supposed to be work. And I instead of using the word work for our purposes, I like the word service more, like avodah, as a servant, and service. How can I be of service? That's the question always. It's always going to be, it's even on Shabbos. It's the question, how can I be of service? It's just a different kind of service. And it's even going to be that way in the time of Mashiach, in a utopian society. We're always going to be of service. We're always there to help and to fix and to enrich and nourish. That is always supposed to be our attitude. It's never supposed to be somehow the goal that I will be taken care of, that I will live like a instead of saying live like a king, imagine the other members of the royal family that are not going to be the king.
Even the spare.
Right. Or all those other, yeah. And even the ones that are so far from it, they're not even really spares. The ones that just happen to be part of the royal family. And so why are they there? What are they meant to accomplish? They could
Service.
think,
That's
right.
what they do.
That's because they could just be taken care of. As long as they don't cause controversy, they'll just be served and taken care of. But you see that they recognize that your existence would be impossible if you really believe that
Right.
you're just there to eat and drink and nobody cares about anything else. And so, yes, many times they will devote themselves to service. They will say that they're there for the purpose of service. Right? And this is always going to be the case. La'avda, we're always there to work the land. We're always there to work in the Beis Hamikdash. We're always going to be there in every even in the best of all scenarios, we're always going to be there to be of service. When you see, even like in the Jubilee year, when it talks about a time of freedom, what does it mean by freedom? It means that those people who are slaves or servants to other people are now going to be free. Free to do what? To serve God without having to be slaves to other people, or people that have loans, which in a certain way enslaves them to others. They're going to be freed. Freed to do what? Freed to do God's service. There's never, and part of God's service is serving creation. When I wake up in the morning, it's the first thing I should be asking. Pinky and the brain. The brain, not Pinky. Pinky and the brain. So it would always start with, how can we, what was his thing? How he wants a plan so that we can take over the world. That was always it. Every day, how can we, that was a thing. What can we do to take over the world? He had some plan, right? So our question is, how can I serve? There was a point where I thought that if you had one notion to live by, I know that Hillel said that all of the Torah comes down to that which is hateful unto you, don't do to other people. And I recognize, I'm not trying to replace Hillel, but a kind of rule of thumb that if you would just follow this one rule of thumb, you could achieve a great degree of righteousness. And that rule of thumb is, anyone or anything you come in contact with should be better off because they came in contact with you. That would be my motto. Anything or anyone I come in contact with should be better off because they came in contact with me, which, there's obviously a tremendous learning curve to figure out how to do that and how I could be, but that's the question you're asking. How can I be of service? If I ask myself, why am I here? The translation of why I'm here is, how can I make this context better? It's maybe, I don't know specifically what needs to be done, but then I work to try to figure that out, because that's the question. Wherever I am, whatever context I'm in, how can I make this better? How can we say that after I was here, that this place is better off, that this person is better off? I remember we once rented out our apartment in Israel, when Sippy and I were living in Israel, in Beher-Bechukotai. We once rented out our apartment, and we came back, and the people who rented our apartment had put in screens, because in Israel it was very common that the windows did not have screens. Very common, they didn't have screens. So these people rented our apartment and they put in screens, and they didn't ask us to pay for it or anything. They stayed in the apartment for a couple months, and we came back and there were screens everywhere. And when we talked to them about it, they were like, no, we would never think, we didn't ask you. We would never think to ask you for the money for it. It was all our own idea. But it was also clear that this was their way in the world. Wherever they went, they somehow left the place better off than the place that they went to. Imagine that is your attitude every time you got an Airbnb, that you're going to look around while you're there and see, is there something I could do here that would make this place nicer, better, that I could give to this place, that it would somehow be better? And every time I rented a car, is there a little something I could do to this car, that this car is better off because I rented it? Or whenever I'm in a store, is there some way that I can give to the people that are working here? And there are some people that do, with the smile and a gesture and a saying hello and certain things. By the time they leave, everybody in the store is just smiling and, in such a much better state than they were before this person walked in. There are people that have this way in the world, where as they're walking through every place, there was a Doonesbury cartoon, I remember, that has Zonker, who's this kind of clueless holy man, sort of kind of hippie, kind of clueless.
Guru type.
Yeah, but he's totally clueless of, about this. He's just so like naturally in his space. But it was just a one cell comic, and you see Zonker walking through, and in front of him, everything's in black and white, but behind him, as he's walked through, everything's in color. There's like butterfly, like it's like there's like a garden or park, and he's walking through. So the stuff in front is all black and white, but as he's walking through, everything's in color, and there's butterflies flying through, etc. Like that way in the world, like you're somehow in the world in that way, that everything is somehow better because you were here, and that's not by accident, that it's actually your motto. You're not looking. There's people that they end up in the hospital. You hear about these people. They end up in the hospital for something, and before you know it, they heard that there's somebody who doesn't have visitors, so they're in the other room saying hello to the person, and are they okay? Moving in with their IV thing, walking around. Where's Mr. Smith? We're supposed to give Mr. Smith a bath. He's in the other room. Saying hello to so and so. Like they can't even sit down for a minute. They're already out there, trying to figure out what they can do and how they can make things better. La'ovda u'lashamra. Okay, I am very grateful for this opportunity to learn with you guys. I suggest we do this again next week at this same time. And I hope you had a good Lag BaOmer, a meaningful Lag BaOmer, and our count as we go forward should be a complete count and a rich count, and we should get to our goal and beyond. Be well.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Right, be well. Bye-bye.
Thank you. That was great. Thank you, Reverend. Yes.
There's many things